And happy Thursday, and more importantly, happy March, Xavier basketball fans. This is your weekly Razorcast. That's Reaker and Zink, talking all things Muskie basketball, and what a day to be talking about it. Well, we've been mentioning all year, in order to be mentioned with the greats, you got to bring home a championship, and the Muskies did that last night, assuring a tie of their first Big East championship. And, Jim, you got to be bouncing around like golf balls on the moon.
Yeah, it's like happy March. What a present the Musketeers have sitting in the Cintas Center today with that Big East championship. And, as a Musketeer fan, you know, we just keep ascending, as we say, keep going higher and higher and higher. And, you know, I've talked about all season that a Big East championship, you know, everybody talks about national championship. A Big East championship is quite an accomplishment with what this league has done through the years. And so it is a day to celebrate it, and it is March, you know, that month we wait for the madness to begin, and it won't be long. Yeah.
And we said, you know, in order to be called one of the great teams, you got to bring home a championship, like we said, and sometimes it is harder to bring home that conference championship. And we're heading into March, and we'll see where it goes. Not a lot going on the court for the Muskies this past week, since they did not have a Saturday game. Probably more to talk about in the Big East, but we do have the game last night, and we got another game this Saturday. Of course, we don't want to stumble and slip into a tie for this Big East championship. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, let's talk about last night and the revenge win over the only other team besides Villanova that's beaten us in the Big East, the Providence Friars.
Yeah, the revenge tour, as we've talked about all season long. Of course, it started with regular season games against some of the opponents that had defeated us last year, and we took care of all of them. And now we got a little in-season revenge with the Providence Friars. Again, they took the Musketeers down back on, I believe it was like January 2nd. It's been a while ago. So we took care of that. Of course, the only revenge left in the league then in season would be we hope, those Villanova Wildcats, and maybe that'll happen in the Big East tournament in New York City next week. But, yeah, it was a great game. It was kind of a strange feel. I mean, everybody knew what it meant if they won, that they would lock up at least a share of the Big East championship. Got off to a fast start. Looked like it might be a blowout, but, of course, the Friars brought it back to within 3 by halftime. Kind of gave you a little bit of an uneasy feeling. In fact, just watching Chris Mack's interview last night a little bit, and he talked about it at halftime. He said the team kind of came in the locker room down. I think they kind of felt like they let a big lead slip away and let the Friars back into the game. But he said, I looked at him and said, guys, 20 minutes away from a Big East championship. Let's go. Don't be down. Let's go get it. So, and again, they brought it within 1 because they scored. They had the first possession and scored on a set play. And but then the Musketeers again kind of spurted out, and kind of it was you know, pretty much I think the closest they got it again after that first spurt was about 6, and it was double digits. And again, it's you know, I'm sure it was kind of a tough. You look at the scoreboard, you look at the clock, and you try not to get too giddy. You try to stay under control and play the way you need to play at Division I level. But the Musketeers did finish up well, 23 for 26 in their free throws. That, I think, right there was the difference. And that is so important going into March, as you know.
Mm-hmm. And it's an unfortunate loss for the Friars, who are stumbling a little bit and are going to probably need a strong Big East tournament to assure themselves of a spot in the big dance. Some people have them already in, but at 18-12 and just their position in the Big East, you know, I'm not so sure without a strong run they're going to be in. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So they're kind of hurting a little bit, but the Muskies looking very good. Highest ranking ever for a Muskie team at number 3. Of course, Big East champions. Everybody pretty much in their bracketology has them as a number 1 seed if they put together the NCAA tournament right now, but we still got a few things to go, and one of those is we have to go to Chicago on Saturday, another one of those pesky noon games. It's on the road. The Blue Demons, who've been at the bottom of the Big East for pretty much the whole new incarnation of the Big East, but it's not quite the same. Joe Vieto's got them playing pretty well. They're still the only team with a losing record in the Big East, but they do have a couple of big wins in the past few. They've over Providence and over Marquette, but then they'll get turned out and get blown out, or they lose a close one to St. John. So hard to know what to expect, but I know they know it's pretty much going to be their last game of the year, so they're going to be fired up to try to put a dent into Xavier's good feeling. So what can we expect in Chicago on Saturday?
Well, you have to remember that at the Cintas Center, the Musketeers had to fight a scrapping DePaul team and only won by 5 points, 77-72. And if you remember, Max Strus went off, and he is the transfer from Division II Lewis University. He went off that night, had 33 points, was 6 for 12 from three-point range, and kept the Blue Demons in the game. So, it's going to be a tough challenge. And, again, on that interview with Chris Mack, they said, well, is there still motivation to win this game so you win the title outright? And he just looked at the reporter asking him that. He said, are you kidding me? The team that has dominated this league, been the thorn in our side, still the thorn in our side this year, the Villanova Wildcats. If we can keep them from sharing the championship with me, he looked at it and he said, you don't think that's motivation? So I think he made that point very, very clear that there should be a lot of motivation. In fact, as I was just listening to Quentin Gooden and Sean O'Mara speak also, and they said basically, there was a big celebration last night. I don't know if you saw on the news or any of the clips of that. The confetti came down. They came out. They let the students out on the floor. They cut down the nets. They hoisted the trophy. Lots of pictures taken. They were talking about in the locker room, what went on in the locker room. They said, well, it was nothing compared to what went on the floor. But there were a lot of selfies in there, but said after it all kind of died down, they just kind of looked at each other and said, hey, we got more work to do. Time to get back to work tomorrow and get ready for DePaul because we need to win that game. And also at stake on Saturday will be the number 1 seed, because if they do stumble at DePaul and Villanova wins by virtue of their 2 wins over the Musketeers, they will get the number 1 seed. And it's kind of hard to tell how that whole bracket will shake out, because there's a lot of teams right there in the middle with the same records and the tiebreakers and also whatever they do on Saturday. But the way I look at the bracket, the way it's set right now, if Xavier's the number 1 seed, I think it's just better for them as far as matchups. It will keep them away from, it looks like, St. John's and Marquette, who are just 2 teams I deem as dangerous teams for Xavier. They just match up differently with those small, athletic shooting guards that sometimes give the Musketeers problems. So it's an important game on Saturday.
Well, it is a big game, and if they bring it home, I think one of the bigger things is, by tradition, even if you are a champion and you stumble in your tournament, the NCAA traditionally hasn't really held that against you. So winning Saturday might be more important than what happens in the tournament, other than momentum going into the NCAA, because it's unlikely that they'll lose their number 1 seed, even if they would happen to lose in the first round, which is unlikely. But now the pressure's off. They don't need to go deep into the tournament like they felt they had to last year when they're on the ropes. And you're right that we won't know until after all Saturday's games are played. You've got, like right there packed in the middle, Creighton at 10-7, Seton Hall at 9-8, Butler at 9-8, Providence at 9-8, Marquette at 8-9. So a lot of juggling is going to happen in there. But the only thing, even at the bottom, St. John's is at 4-13, DePaul's at 4-13, Georgetown's at 5-12. So about the only things that aren't in play is the fact that things aren't in play. So anything can land anywhere, and we'll talk about that next week and when the tournament is already going. But kudos to Chris Mack and the Muskies for bringing it home, and let's hope they bring it home on Saturday against a team that most people would expect us to defeat handily. But like you said, they're a scrappy bunch, and they gave us a hard time a while ago. But the only thing I really say to that is, teams just aren't the same at the beginning of March as they were at the beginning of January. So we've got that really going for us. And DePaul was one of the very first games that we had in the Big East. And that's another one of the quirks of the schedule, to be one of the first and now one of the last. That seems a little funky, but that's I'm not the one having to put everything together.
Yeah, one other point about that number one seed, and you talk about will they maintain their number one seed in the NCAA if they would win the conference outright and then maybe lose in the tournament conference. Well, and also just an advantage that number one seed has is the timing, in the fact that the 10-7 game is, I believe, Thursday night, and then that quarterfinal game, I might be wrong on my days, Wednesday, Thursday, but anyway, that's Wednesday night, and then the quarterfinal game, the Musketeers' first game against whoever they play, would have played at 7 o'clock the previous night, and they turn around and that tip time for the number one seed is noon, and that's going to be a tough turnaround for anybody, especially against the Musketeers, who one of their advantages of they are so deep. So you're going to have a tired team against a rested team that's probably deeper than you to begin with. So that'll give them another advantage. And I got to think if they win it outright and win at least one game in the tournament, that almost solidifies. And a lot of it's going to depend on other conference champions and tournament champions of other conferences, how other teams like Kansas and Virginia and all them do, Michigan State. In their tournaments. So there's a lot, but there's just a lot of advantages, and I think, again, it's something they want to accomplish. And, you're right. I think, here's the key, too, for the Musketeers, just touching on it, is they are, knock on wood, and I got some right here, they're healthy and actually fairly well rested, just having the last week off before last night's game. So really in good shape at this point of the year.
Well, one of the beautiful things about getting the number one seed is you usually stay close to home. Right now, Joe Lunardi in his bracketology on ESPN has them number one in the Midwest, and that means they would play their opening round games in Pittsburgh, and that would be very nice for the Xavier faithful to be able to head out there and do that. So great season, sitting at 26-4, a lot of records on pace, where Chris Mack's already become the most winningest coach. Trevon Blewett has moved steadily into the number 2 spot in scoring, and the chance to become the winningest team in Xavier history is also out there, since they're right now sitting at 26-4. Now, you mentioned that Coach Mack said Big East tournament. I know he doesn't look at it, but what are the boards saying? What are they talking about in terms of setting that record?
As far as
winning the Big East tournament ever.
Not much really. I mean, he kind of downplays that anyway. So, one other point, you talked about Trevon Blewett. What a storybook ending in the Cintas Center for him last night. As the game was winding down, within a minute, he pretty much went coast to coast with a two-handed dunk, and then was fouled, went to the free throw line to shoot 2 free throws. As the student section started chanting his name, and then another chant that came out kind of a little bit funny. The students started chanting "one more year." Of course, we've always thought that 2 years ago Trevon may be leaving, and then last year we thought maybe he's leaving. So obviously he doesn't have another year, but the fans were showing, or the students were showing him they would like for him to be around one more year. And then being called, substituted, as the entire place erupted with, and he, waved to everyone. It was just a storybook ending for Trayvon Blewett. Couldn't have written a better script for a movie, I don't think.
Well, like we said before, in terms of tournament action and games, we're well in place with that senior leadership with J.P. McCurra, Sean O'Meara, of course, Kareem Cantor coming in as the transfer and being labeled senior, but Trayvon Blewett, the 4 years that he's been here have been very special, and all of them, their last game in Cintas had to be very, very special. And of course, Trayvon Blewett even getting some talk for the Wooden Award. Not as much as others, but they do sort of throw him in there as a possible candidate for Player of the Year. I wouldn't imagine that he's going to get that, but it's just nice to be in the conversation.
Yeah, and also, you hear talk of Player of the Year in the Big East. Unfortunately, I think that's probably going to go to Jalen Brunson. And if you watch Jalen Brunson play, he's an outstanding player. In fact, last night he willed Villanova to that overtime win over Seton Hall. Musketeers almost won it outright last night. I don't know if you saw it, but with 10 seconds left in the game, Kadeem Carrington was standing at the line down by one with a two-shot free throw, and if he'd have made them both, they probably would have won that game in regulation. Unfortunately, he missed the first, made the second. They were able to stop the Wildcats from getting a decent shot off at the end. Went to overtime, got down by 8, I think, at one point, but it continued to claw back on some key shots and great defense, but fell 1 point short. So Musketeers were almost ready to celebrate that outright championship last night about 11 o'clock as the Wildcats went down. But again, kind of like the Musketeers, they're a team that at the end they're gonna grind you out and come up with that close win.
Well, and that's a nice segue into the Big East. And we're talking about, Villanova, of course, fell, as you said, at Creighton in overtime. And now Seton Hall takes them to overtime. And as I've said for a couple of weeks, these are teams that are playing for their tournament life. Probably both of them are in. A lot of people have them in, but those games, I think, are really going to help them solidify that. But the difference between the Muskies and the Wildcats is the Muskies are charging into March, or sort of stumbled into March last year. But Nova seems to be having a few fits here and there. So what's going on with the Wildcats?
Well, they play kind of thin anyway. And, in fact, we were talking about that Jay Wright article on, how he has the way he coaches that program and recruits for that program. But if you remember, there was a line in there. He does recruit kind of thin on purpose so he doesn't have quality players who are sitting on the bench. And so for years, they usually only go about 7 deep. Guys that actually play. So I think that's kind of caught up with them a little bit. Of course, they've been hit by the injury bug a little bit. Phil Booth was out. Of course, he's back. Was it Pascal was out there for a couple games with an injury. They're back now, but and again, remember my conspiracy theory that the Wildcats have had they've been on the road 4 out of the last 5 games, and tough places, Xavier, Creighton, Seton Hall, Providence. And so the schedule's been a little bit tougher for them, and I think that's wore them down a little bit more, whereas I think the Musketeers are a little bit more obviously healthy and rested. So I think that's the difference right there.
Well, and then let's talk a little further into the East. We'll know more in 10 days when the tournament's all over. But right now, a lot of predictors have, of course, Villanova and Xavier. And right now, pretty much, that's a kudo to the Big East that they could very well have 2 number 1 seeds in the NCAA. Most of the people that you look at pretty much say Butler, Creighton, Seton Hall will be in. Who amongst the others that could be mentioned, and that would have to be, Providence and Marquette in particular, who has to have the strong tournament run or possibly even win the tournament to get into the dance?
Well, I think there's two teams you need to talk about in that light. Marquette right on the bubble there. You see them. I think they're mentioned in the first four out or next four out in a lot of the brackets right now. So I believe the Golden Eagles need to win Saturday and maybe win a couple games in the tournament, might get them in. The other team I would be a little bit concerned, I'm talking from Xavier's, but in the rest of the Big Ten's perspective, are the team that has a chance, just the way they've been playing, is St. John's. And, of course, the other advantage St. John's will have is the tournament's played on one of their home floors. And, of course, you would think with the resurgence of that program, they're going to have a pretty good crowd or backing there. So, and they know the only way they're going to make the NCAA is to win it. And they're going to have to win 4 games in 4 days. And that's a tough task, but it's been done a few times in conference histories. In fact, I believe it was it UConn, Syracuse? Somebody did it back in the old Big East, and maybe even won 5 in a row, because when the Big East had about 18 teams in it and they had all those double byes and everything. So those are the two teams we have to watch that still, I think, have a chance to get in. Of course, anybody has a chance to get in if they win the conference, but of course those bottom 4 got to play an extra game. And again, it's set up kind of that that second game comes real quick after that first one, and usually against a quality opponent. It's going to be the 1 or 2 seed, and it's going to be very tough to get beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Well, lots of good things going on. Not as much to talk about in terms of the, like I say, end of the season. Will be in the middle of the tournament by the time we talk this time next week. And, of course, we have our Trogcast on Tuesday. We'll have a lot of things going on there, as we'll be talking about all of our conferences and the players of the year and coaches of the year and the people that need to perform well in their conferences in order to get in. But it's quite possible that we could see 7 teams in the Big East. Again, maybe only a few as 5. That will be a clear picture after we've finished everything up. And then it's an exciting time. By the time we come back to the Razor Cast the week after that, they will have already played the play-in games, and it'll be the first day of March Madness. So coming up quick and an exciting time. And about this time next month, it'll just about be over. So this is the month that fans have been waiting for. Any other thoughts or topics you want to go over before we go to our final segment?
Yeah, just a couple things here. First of all, let's give a shout out to Matt Singleton. He's kind of like the 5th Beatle or the 5th Musketeer, the walk-on who is graduating and was part of, gets to be part of this great experience. And kind of a humorous moment in Chris Mack's press conference last night is one of the reporters asked him to expound on Matt Singleton. And obviously the reporter, I don't think, had done his research, because he said, talk about, here's a kid that's been in the gym for 4 years with you, and talk about what he means to this team. I just wanted to give him a little press time. Well, Chris Mack kind of called the reporter out and saying, and I kind of knew this, Matt Singleton's only been on the team 1 year. He actually grew up in Garrett, Indiana, high school, basketball star in Indiana, but obviously didn't have Division I skills to be on scholarship anywhere, and actually only made the team this year as a senior. And I don't think he was kidding. He said, well, yeah, Matt's been in the gym for the last 4 years, but the first 3 were in the band. And he said, I don't know if you know this, but he's a better tuba player than he is a basketball player. But then it went on to say, yeah, he's done anything we've asked him to do. Sometimes he has to hold a blocking dummy for Tyreek Jones or Kareem Canner or Sean O'Mara, and gets knocked on his butt and takes shots in the face. So he did give him kudos, but I just thought that was a humorous moment. The other thing is, Musketeer fans, let's just go 1 year back. Think about this time 1 year. Same scenario. We were headed to Chicago to play DePaul, but we had our backs against the wall. And if we did not win that game at DePaul and win a game in the tournament, most of the prognosticators said at that time we were not going to make the tournament. Well, we did go up to Chicago and we won that game, actually turned right around and had to play DePaul in our first game in the Big East. And then, of course, if you recall, we beat the Butler Bulldogs in the second game, and that got us in. But remember, we were one of the last at-large teams, only a 9-9 record in the Big East. Of course, that's kind of the big advantage to being in the Big East because of its prominence and high rating that helped us get in the tournament. Of course, we all remember the great run we made. But again, 1 year ago, what a different scenario, and look how far this team, many of the same characters, look how far they've come.
Yeah, kudos to everybody on a fantastic year. We can say it again. We just hope that it keeps going well into March, and everybody prays into April. Congratulations to all the seniors for their time that they spent, and we hope this doesn't happen, but any of the underclassmen who may decide to choose other paths, can't imagine that happening in this group, but you just never know. And we'll be back next week to talk about their first opponent in the conference tournament up there in New York. Okay.
Perfect timing. We'll be on Thursday with the Razorcast, and I believe it'll be Friday when they play their first game, hopefully at noon.
All right. So what do you got for me?
All right. So, again, we're in the celebration mood today. Celebration mode, I guess I should say. So here's my quick trivia question for you. This is just going to be a guess so we can talk about a little bit of this. But, again, this is the third league that the Musketeers have won a championship in. Remember the Mid-City Conference, Mid-College City, MCC.
Midwestern City Conference, then the Midwestern Collegiate Conference.
There you go. Thank you. Xavier was in their first conference and won championships, and then, of course, moved to the Atlantic 10 for 17 years and won championships. And then now this is, again, their fifth year in the Big East, and, of course, they've climbed to the top of the mountain there by winning a championship. But just give me your best guess, Jeff. How many regular season MCC championships do you think the Musketeers won?
A lot. I mean, they were up there. That was the Bob Stack in the beginning. I think it's just 1 year under Skip Prosser. That was the Stack and Gillen years. I'm going to say 9.
Very close. 8. 8 regular season championships, 6 tourney championships, but maybe even the most important stat, and the reason why they moved on is they won 6 of their last 8 years. They won the regular season championship of the MCC and then moved, of course, to the Atlantic 10. How many Atlantic 10 regular season championships do you think they had?
Well, that's a little different because the Atlantic 10 actually it was a 2-division type of thing. But
yeah, I'm counting division championships as a championship. So.
I think they had just about as many. I'll say 8 in there too.
Actually 9 there. So you're very
they have the right
close.
Numbers in the wrong order. Okay, great.
There you go. 17 years, they won 9 regular season championships, coupled with 4 tournament championships. So again, it came to, what did I have? Oh, here it is. And they won 5 of the last 7 years there. They won either a division or at some point they were actually just one division there. So again, they started to dominate that league, and again was the reason why. And of course, a lot of other things happened with the Catholic 7 and football with the Big East and the reorganization, but got invited into the Big East, of course, and now we have reached the top there. And in both cases, there's kind of some similarity in the fact that early in the MCC, they didn't dominate. They were successful winning a championship here and there and getting a bid by winning the tournament here and there, but it took them a while to start to become the dominant flagship team of that league. And then was the same thing with the A10. First year in the A10, I think they finished, that was Skip Prosser, I think they finished like 15-13 and got beat in the first round of the A10 tournament and didn't even get a NCAA bid that year. So, again, they started kind of at the bottom and, again, kind of scuffled and scuffled until they started to dominate that league and become the flagship. And our hope is, although I think it's going to be a bigger challenge, is that one day, we start to be at the top of the Big East every year. Of course, just to remind fans, we started out, we were third the first year, but then we dropped to sixth. Then we jumped to second. Of course, that was a great year 2 years ago that ended early in the NCAA tournament. And then last year, of course, we finished seventh. We were the seventh team out of the Big East. And, again, we have to give kudos to the Big East for being such a good conference to help us get that bid despite that 500 record in the league. And, of course, we're sitting today, again, at number one.
And that's great stuff. Okay. A couple quick tidbits. And, again, you can join us on Tuesday for our Trogcast. All things NCAA basketball. It will be an exciting time as the conference tournaments are coming up, and next Thursday is our Razor Cast. A couple little tidbits here to pass you. 3 generations of big-time Muskies have birthdays this week. We'll start in reverse order. The youngest, Matt Stainbrook, will turn 26 on Saturday. Generation for that, about different level, but just as much success. Romain Sato will turn 37 tomorrow. And one of the few retired numbers on Saturday, Brian Grant will turn 46. And something else, turning of age, something that anybody of my age will remember. This is the 45th anniversary of Schoolhouse Rock, those little ditties that they put together on Saturday morning to teach us many things, whether it was conjunction junction, hooking up words and clauses and phrases, or something that I know I use in the classroom that you did too.
Can you give us a rendition of your favorite? Can you give us a singing rendition?
That's it.
Of your
That's it. Conjunction, junction. What's your function? Hooking up words and clauses and phrases. And it's really kind of sad because it really wasn't rock music. It was more like the blues and all that. But and I was surprised when I saw that pop up that actually lasted 13 years in different venues, whether in different types of things they did: multiplication, grammar, history, science, money, earth. So quite a thing that a lot of kids have been singing for many, many years. Well, we thank you guys for listening to us, and we'll look forward to having all kinds of great news celebrating Xavier's outright, for sure, Big East championship, and looking to top on that with a Big East Conference championship when we meet next week. And until then, of
course, Jeff, as I told you, me and the wife, I convinced her. That was the first big job, but we're going to go to Chicago to hopefully see that outright championship, but nonetheless celebrate up there a little bit and enjoy the city and enjoy the Musketeers and get ready for March Madness in spring.
It's a beautiful city. A lot of fun to be had up there, and I'm sure there'll be a nice little couple maybe from Milwaukee coming down to spend a little time with you, and that'll be fun as well. All right, until next time.
Go Muskies!